Kojo was a broke loser who spent his days wasting away like you. However, when a badass shaman was sent to assassinate him, he discovered he was actually the reincarnation of Dracula and began murking anyone who stood in his way. This turned him into a bad bitch magnet, and he started clapping the hottest girls on the island. Before this, Yukina moves in as his next-door neighbor, and Kojo becomes curious about her, so he meets Mina, his teacher, who's a powerful mage and one of the few humans who know about his vampire status. He asks her about the Lion King organization, where Yukina works, and finds that they're actually his arch-enemies and were created specifically to destroy him. Mina warns him against getting close to any of their members, but it's already too late, as Kojo has been getting cozy with Yukina. When returning from the mall with her, Kojo finds that she's friends with his younger sister, Nadisa, who insists on throwing a welcome party for Yukina. They get home, and since Kojo's at a toddler's IQ level, Yukina helps him correct his homework. After seeing a picture of Kojo and his teammates, Yukina becomes curious about his failed basketball career and asks Kojo what happened. It turns out he was pretty good, but his ego made him the most hated guy on the team, so he got yeeted. After dinner, Yukina leaves Kojo and his sister, but the moment he walks out to get a drink, Yukina shows up and is so wet that it turns him on. She tells him not to leave her side because she's still observing him, and then they'd walk him to the convenience store. Yukina becomes excited about a crane game, so they stop to pick up a teddy, but Mina shows up from behind, asking them to reveal their faces and why they're out at that hour of the night. Thankfully, a fire breaks out in the distance, and Kojo takes advantage of the brief distraction to run with Yukina. They find that the fire is being caused by a familiar, so Yukina prepares to handle the situation, but Kojo offers to follow her. She reminds him of his identity and how exposing himself could cause him harm, then hops onto a moving train and spots a dude trying to fight the familiar. Before she gets there, the dude gets wounded by the familiar's master, a Catholic exorcist named Rudolph, who's pleased to battle with an elite such as Yukina. They begin sparring, and Yukina sustains a tiny cut on her leg. Then Rudolph summons another familiar, a lady, who uses a mighty homunculus to attack Yukina. Just when Yukina is about to be executed, Kojo shows up from nowhere and punches the familiar with his bare hands, rescuing Yukina. But Rudolph's familiar returns and punches him with the homunculus, throwing him mid-air as he bleeds from his stomach, and quite strangely, Kojo starts burning up and screams in anguish as his body releases a barrage of lightning strikes. The next morning, news about the explosion spreads far and wide, owing to the disruption Kojo caused because he couldn't control his powers. When confronted by Yukina, he explains that he lost control of his powers because he's a virgin vampire, meaning he's not sucked anyone's blood yet. Somehow, one of his friends overhears the conversation and teases Kojo for letting a junior mock him for having zero-stroke game. And when he gets to class, his cultured class boys flock around him to ask about Yukina. Coincidentally, Mina walks into class and loudly summons Kojo, asking for the girl he spent the night with. Hearing this, his class boys start hating on him, and Asaji, a tech bro crushing on him, looks like she's about to dump his sausage in a shredder. When they get to Mina's office, she tells them about the disruptions that have been reported in the city and cautions Kojo that if his identity is out, there will be a manhunt for his head. As they leave her office, Yukina says that the only way to prove Kojo's actions as self-defense will be to find something shady to report about Rudolph, who is apparently an internationally wanted criminal. They strategize about how to locate him, and Kojo meets Asahi to help him track some of the possible hideouts. Their search leads them to the island's north side, and they locate the hideout in a seemingly abandoned factory. However, Yukina breaks the fake rusty lock and leads them into a lab teeming with homunculi embedded in a greenish fluid. Rudolph's familiar tells them to run them all they can, because the island is on the verge of sinking. Just then, Rudolph shows up and yaps about how he's finally about to destroy them using Astarte, now that he's embedded her with a stronger familiar. Kojo gets upset to find that Rudolph's just recklessly using Astarte, so he charges up for a fight, but with one blow from the giant homunculus, he falls to the ground. Yukon also tries to fight the homunculus with her weapon, but also fails because Rudolph has modified it to absorb magical powers. This gives Rudolph the upper hand, and he swings his axe towards Yukina. But to her greatest shock, Kojo intercepts the attack with his body, his blood splashing on her face. To finish the job, Rudolph severs Kojo's body from his head, leaving a traumatized Yukina holding his head. After a while, Kojo's body is completely healed, and apparently it did so by itself, with its pieces coming back together and all the blood flowing back into his body. While Yukina rants about him dying in her place, he pins her to the floor and whispers flirty words into her ears, causing her to blush and struggle from his hold as her floodgates are about to burst open. Just then, the building trembles and Kojo sees news alerts about an attack on a building where Asaji works. He calls to check on her and find out about Rudolph's movements, then learns that Rudolph is after an unknown treasure hidden in the lower floors of the building. Hearing this, Yukina prepares to stop them before it's too late, but Kojo holds back because he's been a third wheel on the battlefield. However, she reminds him that he hasn't been acknowledged by the familiars only because he's yet to consume human blood, so she tells him to suck her blood. Kojo initially refuses, but hugs her and feasts on her jugulars till she drops. Meanwhile, Rudolph finally gets to the treasure and sheds tears of joy while ordering Astarte to grab it. But Kojo spoils his show as he appears overhead. Apparently, the treasure is the hand of a dead saint who passed away after he was used as a sacrifice to hold the island together, so Rudolph plans to claim it back. When Kojo sees that Rudolph is determined to seize the body and risk destroying the entire island, he jumps forward and attacks the homunculus, with Yukina joining him afterwards. They clash for a while, and when Rudolph realizes that Kojo is more powerful than before, he goes full throttle on him, proceeds to activate a magical armor, and manages to get Kojo to the ground. However, Kojo makes it harder for his opponent by summoning the fifth familiar, a fire breather, which charges towards Rudolph and pins him to the wall. The second attack is blocked by the homunculus, but Yukina charges with her spear and pierces through it, then subsequently strikes Rudolph to the ground. After getting some arousal from hugging Yukina, Kojo draws some of Astarte's blood to bring her under his command, though this infuriates Yukina. Later, she packs her luggage, prepared to face the organization after breaking so many rules, including the lance they vested upon her. But a surprising delivery comes in, and she finds an exact replica of her weapon, which makes her happy because it means that she can stay with Kojo. Later, a beast man is seen on the rooftop and gets caught by Mina, so he tries to attack her multiple times, but she's surprisingly so good at spatial magic that she can tutor Baba Yaga. In no time, she arrests him, using her magic to bind him while asking him who his master is. In the morning, at Kojo's residence, he accidentally walks into his sister's room and sees Yukina in her underwear, and given his natural inclination to be a spunk, he zooms in on her giant and gets kicked in the face. On the bus, he apologizes to her, saying he wasn't expecting her to be there anyway. His sister explains that they'll both be cheerleading for the soccer team because the cultured boys simped hard for Yukina to cheer them on, promising to bring the trophy home. Kojo meets Asaji at the school, and they discover that their friends have paired them up for badminton, attempting to get them to hook up. Meanwhile, Mina busts a scientist working undercover as a beast man, and when he transforms and attacks, she commands Astarte to use him for soccer practice. The idiot is beaten to a pulp and cuffed in chains, but Mina finds that the kingpin of the operation has moved their activities elsewhere. Back at school, Asaji tries on her badminton outfit and hopes to please Kojo with it, but since she wastes too much time, he goes out for some air. However, something moves from the bushes and shoots at him multiple times. He finds two weird metallic lions, but refrains from attacking them because he doesn't want to destroy the school. The lions attack him, and he barely survives by dodging them, but fortunately for him, Yukina shows up from the blue and attacks them, saying he's lucky that her device had picked up on danger. She also explains that the lions were messenger Shikimas, and coincidentally, Kojo finds a black envelope with a seal. While they're discussing, Asaji shows up and sees them together. But seeing that Yukina totally ate in her cheerleader outfit, she runs in embarrassment. The black envelope is an invitation from one Lord Vatler, from the house of the first progenitor, requesting that he show up with a partner. At the party, Yukina appears in a pretty dress and Kojo stifles the urge to bend her over. Once they enter the building, they go upstairs to find their host, but as soon as they do, someone attacks them without warning, none other than Lord Walter. Abruptly, darts come flying towards Kojo, and a baddie shows up, telling him to get his filthy hands off Yukina. She hunts Yukina, who introduces her as Sayaka, her former roommate and an assassin for the Lion King organization. In the hall, Walter explains that he invited them to demand that Kojo eliminate a dark faction that threatens the first progenitor's rule. Otherwise, Walter will destroy the entire island to accomplish this. Yukina quickly steps in and says she'll destroy the faction herself in Kojo's place, so Walter agrees, but says he's going to test her abilities first. The next morning, Kojo wakes up to every man's dream, with Asaji on all fours and her melons brushing against his face, but the idiot says she's too heavy and pushes her off the bed. However, he somehow lands in a compromising position and Yukina and his sister walk in on them. Yukina gets jealous and takes off. Then Asaji, noticing his reaction, asks him if he has a secret that Yuki's blackmailing him with. Before he answers, Asaji walks away, satisfied that she's finally declared war on Yukina. Afterwards, Yukina warns Kojo to control the sausage because his magical powers could be activated when it gets hard. At school, they head to Mina's office to make inquiries about the dark faction in question, but find Astard working as Mina's maid, much to their surprise. Mina tells them to relax because Vatler is virtually untouchable, and the dark faction has been unable to access the weapon of massive destruction. Later, Kojo meets Asaji to look into the weapon called Nalikuvera, and they get into an isolated room where she conducts some research to locate it. Just then, a lecturer walks into the room, and they quickly take cover under a table, but end up in a Marvin Gaye video shoot. As usual, Kojo's hormones respond and cause him to bleed, so Asaji becomes curious, but he refuses to say a word. Suddenly, Sayaka appears with a mission to unalive Kojo and expresses her disgust at his open philandering, even after exposing Yukina to really dangerous situations. She stabs him and his body starts discharging an enormous amount of energy. To worsen the situation, Asaji coincidentally arrives at the scene. Kojo struggles to contain his powers and tells her to stay back, but she does so too late, and he releases an explosion that knocks her out. Yukina arrives to stop the chaos and yells at them for wreaking havoc. She takes Asaji to the clinic and is assured that she'll recover in no time. But as soon as she wakes up, Asaji starts bitching about Yukina's relationship with Kojo. However, they're interrupted when some beastmen led by a man called Christoph barge into the clinic, shoot Astard, then drive off Yukina, Asaji, and Sayaka. The gunshots alert Kojo and Sayaka, but before they can intervene, the men escape with the girls, leaving Kojo frustrated. At the same time, Kojo's friend Yaze chases after them and swallows a pill that activates his levitation powers. With his ability to amplify sounds, he finds that they're about to board a chopper, so he ODs on the pills and tries to find out where they're headed. But Vatler shows up and blasts his body into the sea to stop him from interfering with the operation. On the plane, Christoph tells Asaji that he forcefully took them away because she's a pro hacker and they need someone to crack the Nalikuvera, which will be used against the first progenitor. Blackmailing her, he reminds her that if no one controls the weapon, it could cause an apocalypse. Back at school, Kojo thanks Sadaka for treating Astard, and they arrive at a roadblock leading to the facility where the weapon will be tested. They meet Mena and Walter at the spot where the weapon is used to destroy some dumb cop vehicles, following Christoph's instructions. Noticing that they're on Walter's ship, Yukina becomes curious about why Vatler isn't even trying to stop Christoph, who's supposed to be the enemy. Apparently he's just bored and needs a toy to play with, and he isn't even slightly bothered if this claims millions of lives on the island. As he leaves, Asaji decides to act quickly and hack the weapon, but Nagisa suddenly gets consumed by an unknown spirit and tells the ladies to chill the heck out because Kojo will soon intervene. Meanwhile, Kojo receives Yaze's unconscious body from Walter, who's about to have some fun destroying the fire-breathing weapon with his serpents. However, Yukina calls to tell him about how dangerous the weapon could be, so he stops Walter shortly before he kicks off the fight. In response, Walter destroys the bridge to prevent him from escaping, leaving Kojo at the mercy of the weapon. The battle begins with Kojo dodging the lasers, while Sayaka steps in to block the attack with her sword, attempting to dissect the body of the laser spider. However, it's built like Thor's hammer, so she fails to land even a scratch on it before it flies. However, Kojo summons a familiar and blasts the machine into the ground, burying himself and Sayaka underneath. For a brief second, he squeezes her melons to cool off and later apologizes because he learned that she's a virgin and has a phobia for the big D soon after. Water starts leaking into the crater, and they spot the laser spider fixing itself. While Asaji is working hard to finally gain control of the weapon, Yukina sneakily unalives some beastmen, but she's in for the shock of her life when she walks into a room filled with more of those laser spiders. Christoph had apparently obtained them to create an army, so he could cause unimaginable destruction. He assumes beast mode and attacks Yukina, who delivers multiple blows with her bare fist, and when they move out, she receives her spear from Yaze via his wind control abilities. With her sword, she slices Christoph's hand, but surprisingly discovers that he's finally gained control of the other weapons. On the other hand, Kojo and Sayaka meet a dead end while trying to escape, and he notices her perky balance, so he gives her his jacket to cover up before his sausage pops out of his pants. To thank him, Sayaka lets him suck her blood, though she totally wouldn't mind him sucking on other things. This gives him the power to summon one of his progenitors, and when Kristoff spots this, he leaves his men behind to handle the situation, giving Minna the opportunity to teleport them into the sea. Just then, Yukina receives a call from an unknown person saying she's speaking on behalf of Asaji, who has embedded a secret command in the laser spiders. Meanwhile, Kojo's familiar launches an attack against the spiders but gets overwhelmed when Kristoff's chief drone launches multiple attacks. Yukina later joins him and Sayaka to fight the drones, but unfortunately, the drones mastered his attack pattern and countered him, making it hard and nearly impossible for them to be defeated. However, Yukina encourages them and tells them about Asaji's secret feature, which causes the drones to self-destruct with her voice command. The only issue is that they'll encounter it as gaining access to the master drone, so they first have to stop the drones from moving towards them. Sayaka volunteers to handle this and uses her weapon to freeze them for a brief moment. Yukina and Kojo take advantage of the situation and bring down Kristoff, with Yukina launching herself into the air and throwing the phone into the mother drone. Kristoff watches as Asaji's recorded voice command plays, and all the drones harden to stone and break down at once. The next day on the bus, Kojo tells Yukina that Sayaka had been unnecessarily calling him all through the night, but she found it strange because Sayaka is a known hater of men, and would always leave them on our. Yukina gets jealous and walks away. Then at class, Kojo gets teased by a classmate who finds out that neither he nor Asaji had enough sleep last night. He secretly follows Asaji to the art room and acts as her model for a portrait, but she finds him boring with his lack of taste in clothes. So she pulls out a costume box and threatens to develop plot with him if he doesn't change into a suit. He quickly agrees because he has a terrible stroke game, so they both take pictures of each other. Asaji then tells him that she's dying to know what his secret is, so she books another date with him and promises to reveal a little secret of hers in return. On his way out, Kojo meets Yukina and tells her his intention to reveal his identity to Asaji, but she tells him that his problem wouldn't really be Asaji but his younger sister, who absolutely hates vampires and other demons. Just then, he sees Nagisa receiving a letter from one of her crushes in school, but finds it hard to believe that any guy would find her attractive, typical douchebag of an older brother. Later, Sayaka calls him to inform him that she'll be busy guarding an important guest, but he spots a fire from afar, and on the scene, a lady is seen lying in a pool of her blood, killed by the winged person who exits almost immediately. The next day, Kojo stalks his sister and overhears her making pleasure sounds, mentioning something about the dude licking her honeypot so good. He can't stand it anymore and kicks the door open, but surprisingly, he sees them playing with a cat, which was initially being watched by a friend called Kanase. Nagisa leaves them with Kanase, who takes them to an abandoned monastery where she was raised to become a nun, and now currently raises a bunch of cats like a lonely old hag. Meanwhile, at school, Yaze and Mina investigate a woman's corpse and realize that she wasn't killed by a demon, because the marks left behind resembled those of a mere human who had just sucked her spiritual core. Walter tells them that her death is probably linked to the disappearance of a sacred airship owned by one of the progenitors. He then tells Mina not to involve Kojo in this case, because he's not powerful enough to defeat the powerful lady in question and could die while fighting her. The following day, Mina calls Kojo to accompany her on her attack mage duties, to catch some bad guys that were supposedly responsible for the night attacks. When the fireworks begin, Mina teleports them to the site of the attacks and they see some winged fighters destroying a building. So Mina uses her spatial magic to launch Yukina into the air, using some chains targeted at the winged fighters. However, they break the chains and even avert Kojo's attack with his familiar, but as soon as one of them draws nearer to Kojo and the other winged fighter attacks it, digging into its flesh. However, the fighter's mask accidentally breaks, revealing Kanase's face. Even when Kojo tells her to stop, she digs into the other fighter and goes into vulture mode before flying away. At the break of dawn, Kojo and Yukina visit a factory owned by Kanase's father and meet his secretary, who puts them on a chopper to visit him on an island. However, the pilot drops them there with no sign of a living soul and takes off immediately. The duo decides to survive first and scouts the island for a place to rest, since they can't access the network to call for help. Meanwhile, Yaes meets Sayaka at the abandoned church and strikes a deal with her, saying that she shouldn't let Kojo and the others find out about his real identity in exchange for some information on Kojo's whereabouts. But just then, Nagisa and Asagi join them, and a fight breaks out between Sayaka and Asagi over Kojo. On the island, Kojo summons a lion head familiar, which brings down some rain and makes Yukina so wet that her milk sack buttons become perkier. Afterwards, she fixes them a coconut-themed dinner, and while they chow, Kojo becomes worried about Kanace, believing that her father must be using her as an assassin. Asagi, on the other hand, tracks their location and finds that Kanace's father is up to some shady shit. But somehow she loses focus and starts fighting with Sayaka over Kojo. Yaes smartly reminds the ladies that Kojo could be developing plot with Yukina at that very instant, so the ladies calm down and suspend their fight. On the island, Kojo wakes up to find that Yukina is not beside him, so he goes to search for her, but instead sees an upgraded and super plotty version of Kanace bathing at a river. Of course, his eyes linger on her gut and he starts bleeding, but she disappears in a split second and Yukina appears from the blue, threatening him with her spear to keep his cultured eyes away from her. He narrates what he saw and they head out to search for the lady, but a boat arrives and some soldiers troop out, shooting at them the moment they see them. Soon, they're surrounded and almost helpless, but someone shoots the soldiers, none other than Kanace's doppelganger standing on a hilltop. She introduces herself as Princess Folia, and apparently knows that Kojo is the fourth progenitor. She tells Kojo to sink the ship because it's being remotely controlled by a mothership elsewhere. So with the help of his familiar, he blocks the attacks of the remnant soldiers and sends them to the bottom of the sea. Back at the factory, the secretary, Beatrice, is seen talking with Kanace's father about how potentially dangerous Kanace could be, being an angel with the highest form of power. He says they can't control her because she's way bigger than they can curtail. But Beatrice is only concerned about cashing out with the poor girl and using her in an all-out battle against Folia. On the island, Folia explains that Mega's craft is after her because it went to use her body for experiments, since she's got royal blood. It turns out that Kanace is also an illegitimate child of a royal, and her father, Kensei, adopted her to convert her into a fox angel, along with 6 others. Just then, Mega's craft arrives on the island, waving a white flag. They offer to leave them unhurt if Folia peacefully follows them, but when this doesn't happen, they release Kanace from a coffin and Yukina tries to neutralize her powers with her spear but fails. Beatrice then takes over the fight against Yukina, using a familiar with numerous whips, while the normal-looking dude transforms into a beast man and moves to attack Folia, who's out of royal bullets. In the sky, Kanace charges up and emits so much light, which she channels towards Kojo. He tries to defend against these attacks with his familiars, but she's just so unstoppable. However, his Einstein logic suggests that it'll be a good idea for him to expose himself, hoping she hears him out. The laser beams hit him in the stomach, and he falls flat on the ground. Seconds later, Kanace spirals out of control and basically turns to Elsa, while the Mega's team runs like cowards. On the Mega's ship, Sayaka defeats some soldiers, and Mina tells her that the princess she was supposed to be guarding is on the same island as Kojo and Yukina. But seeing the giant ice tower Kanace created, they're pretty sure Kojo is in trouble. Back on the island, Yukina protects them from Kanace's attack with a barrier, but Kojo's wounds aren't healing as they usually should. So the princess attempts to use her royal powers to awaken one of his familiars that could defeat Kanace. She proceeds to strip him and use her mighty balloons to entice him back to life. But Yukina can't stand to watch that, so she offers to do it herself instead and kisses him with some of her blood. Subconsciously, Kojo draws her in for another kiss, caresses her, and suckers her blood till she passes out. When he regains consciousness, his wounds quickly heal and Folia tells him to hurry up and save Kanace, or else her consciousness will be lost forever. She goes cowgirl on him and tells him to suck her till she's dry, so he can activate a familiar that'll supersede Kanace in might. Soon after, he breaks them out of the ice barrier and gets into an altercation with Kensei, questioning what sort of father would subject their child to such inhumane experiments. Kensei says that he only wants his daughter to be a strong and independent woman, the highest being next to God himself. Beatrice interrupts the conversation and attacks with some clones of Kanace, vowing to create a clone of Folia too. Annoyed, Kojo charges up for a fight and battles the clones whose powers he absorbs and nullifies, while Yukina woots Beatrice so much that she feels so ashamed to be losing to a barehanded girl. As for the Beastman, Folia shoots him unsuspectingly, and he dies like an idiot. Beatrice gets pumped with rage and decides to end Folia once and for all. But as she plunges into the sky, Folia summons some magical royal beam and slices through Beatrice in her attacks, throwing her body to the ground. As for Kojo, he summons a giant two-headed dragon, combats Kinesa's beams and shatters through her wings, but she still maintains her form. So Yukina summons the fox angel spirit away from her body, and then Kojo's dragon heads shatter the wings. After all is said and done, Sayaka and Mina, beckoned from the ship, and Kinase regains consciousness. Kensei is taken in for questioning, and he explains that he was only creating the Fox Angels because he was preparing for the time when Kojo's power will prove impossible to tame. Yae says he'll be working for them henceforth, and Folia comes to bid her friends goodbye. She kisses Kojo on the lips, making the ladies jealous as they create a ruckus about his sickening Casanova behavior. Months pass by, and it's finally Halloween, so Mina calls Kojo to remind him that it's Halloween season, so he should keep his eye peeled for witchcraft defaulters. True to her words, some witches called the Myers sisters bring terror to the island with octopus attacks and overpower the soldiers on duty. The next day at school, Kojo introduces his old basketball buddy, Yuma, to his harem, and they go sightseeing, during which he receives a call from Folia and Sayaka, who inform him that there was a portal from the airport to the subplot, and they were stuck there. Surprisingly, they're also informed that Mian has disappeared and passed down instructions for them to prioritize Kinesa's safety. Later, Kojo returns home for a bath but finds himself teleported to Yukina's bathroom, where Astarte and Kinase are bathing. He does stare for a bit, but feels strange about the experience, so he reports himself to Yukina, explaining what had happened. She says it's been theorized that there's been a distortion in the island's space, so they'd have to be vigilant at every exit point. Much later, Kojo steps out for a drink, and Yuna comes out in a hot witch costume, then asks him if he'd still love her if she wasn't human. He assures her that not too many of his friends are complete humans, so she bends over and kisses him, but the next morning, Yuna wakes up screaming. Yuna walks to Yukina's room and seems to be blushing at the ladies in their underwear, but she suddenly yells out that she's actually Kojo. They ask him tons of personal questions to confirm that he really is Kojo, and after getting them all, he confesses that Yuna kissed him last night and wrote him so hard that they switched Y and A, but he woke up and she was nowhere to be found in his own body. Meanwhile, Asagi has been trying to find a possible cause to the spatial distortions, and has come across some news of something similar that happened 10 years ago, which was orchestrated by the Witch Sisters. After discussing with Asagi, Yukina figures that the only reasonable explanation for Yuma's behaviors and how she was able to disappear with Kojo's body is that she's also a witch herself. Truly, Yuna presents herself in Kojo's body before Walter and the Meyer sisters, introducing herself as Yuna, the Witch of Notaria. Meanwhile, Asagi reaches a milestone in trying to crack the issue with the spatial disruption and decides to take a nap, while Kojo and the other ladies go out for lunch. He's obviously frustrated about Yuna and her nerve to use his body as she wishes, and even though Yukina would have easily reversed the spell, it'll cause his real body some deathly harm. Just then, Yuna walks to a grimoire she's supposedly using to set her mother and other criminals free, and when she begins to tap into its power, Kojo feels the power surge from where he is. Yukina helps him localize the source, and they head towards the tower, but they keep running into portals and appearing in other places. However, he receives a message from Asagi's AI assistant, showing him a shorter route to his destination, and eventually they'd make it in time. Kojo confronts Yuna and asks for his body to be returned, but finds that she needs it because she requires an immensely strong physical body to break through the prison barrier. Walter says he's just here for the fun and is looking forward to an epic fight with the escaped prisoners. As he disappears, Kojo and Yukina are seized by the witch's tentacles, but they are released on time by Folia and Sadaka, who show up at the right time. However, Yuna gains access to the barrier at the moment and disappears, but Kensei shows up, and following Folia's orders, creates a portal to teleport Kojo and Yukina to the barrier so they can stop Yuna in time. They get there and Kojo confronts her about her actions, but she narrates that she's a test tube baby created for the sole purpose of breaking the prison barrier to rescue her mother and countless criminals. She quickly summons one of Ku's familiars, who uses electrifying powers to break into the prison building. Yet this doesn't set the prisoners free, so she searches until she meets Mina, her only access to the prison barrier. Sana says that Mina has been locked in there for over a decade, guarding the prison gate, and that her physical body as a teacher was only a hologram. To break into the barrier, Yuna would have to kill her, but Kojo confronts her about it. Meanwhile, Sayaka and Folia aren't having an easy time with the nasty witches, but soon find headway and both combine their magic to destroy the witch's tentacles. Back at the prison, Yuta moves to strike Mina's body with her armor, but she's blocked by Yukina's sword. After countless failed moves, Yukina finally gets the perfect opportunity to strike Yuna with the sword, but she fails to do so because she's unsure about Kojo's possibility of survival if she damages his body. To end it all, Kojo decides to handle it himself and throws Yukina's spear towards Yuna, but her armor takes that bullet for her. Yukina, however, turns the tables around and pierces through the armored familiar, right to the tip of Yuma's chest in Kojo's body. With this, she sets him free, and when Yuna wakes up, Kojo tells her that she's been set free from her forced duty to destroy the prison barrier. Relieved, Yuna smiles and agrees to distance herself from the prison barrier. Then, Mina wakes up too. But just when it's time for them to leave, Yuna's armor stabs herself and Mina, and then Mina passes out in Kojo's arms. Just outside the prison, Walter summons his serpents to break into the prison. But Nagisa suddenly appears and transforms into this mega queen that destroys the serpent at once and punches him flat into the ground. She then reverts to her original form and heads back to her master. At the prison, Yuna's mother strips her of her powers, rendering her body weak. She also said that she used a spellbook to trap Mina's powers and reverse her age, so she'll be pretty useless until she finally dies. While she's talking, some inmates spring up and render their support to kill Mina, but Kojo says he can't let that happen, so one of the guys tries to axe him down. Yukina quickly blocks the attack with her spear, and is later joined by Sayaka, who attacks him with lighting and speeds off with them in her 17th century Bugatti Chiron. Meanwhile, Asagi is at lunch with a child who insists that she's her mother, but given that her body count is still 0 and the child looks more like Mina, Asagi asks her if she could be related to Mina. The little girl cries as she hears the name, so Asagi names her Sana, pending when she'll remember her name. Meanwhile, Kojo drives the others to his mother, who has a PhD in witchcraft and can heal Yuna. It turns out that she's Nagisa's master and is even more cultured than her son, because she immediately started fondling Yuna's milk sacs. She tells him that Yuna may eventually die as her magic slowly leaves her, so with Yukina's help, she takes her to the lab. Kojo returns to his room and tends to his injuries, and since Sadaka knows that Yukina won't be back for a while, she gets on the bed and prepares for 50 Shades of Grey. But Yukina spoils the show and asks them to explain what the heck they were doing. Kojo starts to stammer like every cheating bastard but suddenly passes out. It turns out that Kojo was just hungry and needed to chow. Yukina updates him on Yuna's condition and says she's still in pretty bad shape because only a witch as powerful as her mother, Aya, can undo the spell. This obviously has to be Mina, but she's nowhere to be found. However, they spot Asagi on TV and realize that the girl she's holding could be Mina, who's a much younger version of herself thanks to Veda. Kojo quickly calls her to inquire about the girl, but a demonic monk shows up and demands Mina, raging fire from his entire body. Asagi alerts Kojo, who hops into the Bugatti with his bitches and goes into Formula 1 mode to save them. While running with the girl, Asagi activates a water drainage system and temporarily stops the monk, but he soon pops up from underneath the ground. Luckily for them, Astarte is waiting with some guards and deals with him by draining his power and banishing him into a pentagram. But soon enough, a thought continues his fight and uses a neon rope to stall the guards. Asagi and Mina fall to the ground as the lady releases some neon locusts, but luckily they're rescued by Walter. The thought releases her insects and binds Walter's serpents, but he nullifies her magic with a tentaculous creature, then binds her and slowly begins to chip away parts of her. Kojo arrives in time and stops him from turning into Ted Bundy, and Astarte binds the thought away. Walter offers to keep Mina safe so Kojo can focus on fighting, and even though the guy really can't be trusted, Kojo accepts the offer. Back at the academy, an escaped prisoner confronts Aya about her intention and why she didn't let the other prisoners know that she'd found the keys to the prison barrier. She summons her elemental giant to X the dude, but he tells her to chill because he's actually interested in her little ritual. She then explains that she's trying to recreate a grimoire that Mina had destroyed, using Mina's memories, starting by transforming the entire school into a playground for her witchcraft fun. Kojo gets on Walter's ship and sees some dude staring jealously at him because Vatler's apparently crushing on Kojo. He heads to a bath, and is surrounded by some baddies who offer him quickies because Vatler's not into women and has no interest in their cookie jars. The idiot runs them down because his stroke game is weaker than yours, so they leave, and Asaji joins him in the bath. However, he sees her hot, plopless body and bleeds, then they retire for the night with Mina. Weirdly, Mina goes into factory reset mode, accessing her backed-up memories with a timer. Meanwhile, one of the prison escapees coats Vatler's ship and starts a fight with him. The guy slices through Valter's dragon like it's a piece of cake, so Vatler summons 2 more familiars. At the same time, another criminal shows up and takes on Yukina and Sayaka, so Kojo and Asaji decide to leave the ship with Mina since Vatler's being crazy with his powers. The butler ushers them through a secret exit, and Areti comes to pick Asaji. As for Vatler, he eventually subdues his opponent with his dragon and some shrapnels, but Sayaka still struggles with hers, who has suddenly transformed into 4-armed Ben 10. When he pushes a strong wind towards her, she counters it with a magical bullet that turns into an electrifying shield and electrocutes him into oblivion. They all reunite, thinking it's all over, but Aya shows up with her grimoire and nullifies everyone's magic. She then stabs Kojo, so Yukina launches into the sky to deal her a blow with her spear, but the witch captures her and confesses that Yukina was the actual target. Knowing that only her spear would still maintain its magical powers against the spell, Kojo and Sayaka rest in a room, and because of Aya's spell, his wounds can't heal since his magical powers are deactivated. Sayaka offers to strip and turn him on, and she begins by showing him her grandma's underwear, but as expected, this kills the mood. Later, Yuna barges in with her injury and offers Kojo her blood because she's Aya's daughter, and since Aya's magic is still active, Yuna's magic will still work for Kojo. She makes a cut on her neck and lets him suck her dry, which works out and activates his vampire state. He also moves to Sayaka, who traps him in between her legs as she can't get enough of him. Afterwards, his 4th familiar is activated, which freezes everything in space and prevents the island from sinking due to a lack of magic. He heads to the school and breaks Yukina out of her cage. Then the 2 brace up to defeat the witch. However, she summons her fellow inmates to fight on her behalf, but Kojo finishes them in one blow. Aya then turns her attention to Yukina and throws her sword towards her to steal her memories, but in the nick of time, a golden guardian appears, which was sent by Mena. She's apparently retrieved her memories and claims the book from Aya, using it to bind her familiar, but Aya quickly sells her soul to the devil and assumes the most powerful state a witch can ever exist in. Mercifully, Yukina's sword can return her back to her basic witch state, so she uses it and weakens Ada, returning sanity to the island as all her magical spells are nullified. They all later watch the fireworks and Yuna kisses Kojo goodbye. Then everyone witnesses Yukina proposing to Kojo. Days later, Kensei is attacked by a caricature of Michael Jackson, who calls himself Ku and claims to be returning for his master's keepsake to activate the wise man's blood. Meanwhile, Yukina is given a 4-day vacation and told to have fun instead of babysitting a lousy virgin vampire. She meets him at the mall to inform him of the development, but they're later visited by Ku, seeking for Kanaze to use her as an offering to Wiseman. Ku attacks Kojo with his alchemist powers and Yukina steps in to rescue him. The guy sees that he's at a disadvantage, so he flees, but first, he tries to end Kojo with a tree he transformed into steel. Curious, Kojo visits Mina's office and asks Astarte what alchemists like Ku are after. He finds that they're after immortality, so he goes to inquire for more about them from Asaji. However, she knows nothing about it, so he heads to the old monastery, where Ku will later carry out his ritual. On the way, he overhears someone and pins Asaji down in the first, but it's just Mina, who looks so disgusted that a baddie like Asaji has basically destroyed the bar for a tiny sausage. He gets released and heads out with Yukina, who takes him to a hotel and mentions something about her first time. So he thinks it's about to go down in room 306, but she tells him to close his eyes, and he finds himself in the Lion King organization. They're welcomed by Sayaka in cosplay and addressed by a dumb black cat who retrieves Yukina's lance and tells her to enjoy her vacation so she can recharge. Asaji calls Kojo to report that she lost the earrings he got her and was searching for them around the monastery. He warns her to stay off, but she's too invested in the damned earrings. Unknown to her, Ku and his master are at the old monastery, activating the wise blood ritual. The legendary alchemist Nina materializes and the boss Skinny dips in her blood. Soon after, his body starts getting devoured, and he calls out to Kao for help, but he should have known that he was just a scapegoat and Ku was in it for his own good. Soon, Asaji is hit by the debris of the building and watches the blood ritual take place. But as soon as Kao spots her, he slices through her abdomen and she falls dead. Kojo runs to the spot only to find Asaji dead, and in his anguish, he cries out, releasing so much power that it disrupts the island's systems. Ku comes around and mocks him, triggering Kojo and Yukina to launch a simultaneous attack on him. However, he dodges the attacks and activates his metallic immortal form. So Kojo summons a Mercury Devourer, which gets rid of the ugly chunk of metal. Just then, Asaji resurrects with her blood stains and seems to have forgotten that she was dead. She follows Kojo home to take a bath, but as soon as she washes the stains off, she finds a red button on her chest, and when she presses it, she falls unconscious. She gets up and walks plotless into the sitting room, giving Kojo another reason to bleed for lust. Actually, the lady speaking was no longer Asaji but Nina, whose blood was used for the ritual and had saved Asaji from truly dying. She creates a towel out of some flowers because she's also an alchemist, then tells Kojo not to get carried away, because Ku isn't dead and has only divided himself into parts. While this conversation is ongoing, Ku sneaks into a building and gets entrapped by Mina to stop him from getting to his target, Kinase. He soon turns to his metal form and breaks free from the chains, but Astarte silences him so easily. At Kojo's, Nina promises to leave Asaji's body as soon as she retrieves the wise man's blood. Yukina later joins them for dinner, so Kojo tells Nina not to mess things up and act like Asaji. The next day, Yace keeps track of the wise man's blood that Cal had hidden away. Then he orders the cops to freeze it with liquid nitrogen and magic spells. But as soon as the bastard cow shows up, it all melts away, and the cops frantically shoot at it. However, the bloody wise man creates an explosion with the bullets fired. At the scene, Nina explains to Kojo that this effect wasn't really Ku's doing, but the wise man himself, who is the most powerful alchemist alive and only aims to destroy the lesser humans. While the students are on their cruise ship vacay, Yukina and Kinase have a bad feeling and follow their hunch to inspect the ship. At the parking lot, Ku joins them and Kinase decides it'll be better for her to run farther away from the other students to avoid hurting them. So he hurls a car at her and sets off a hot chase. On the other hand, Asaji's body loses consciousness, so Nina creates body double with some of her blood. Mina joins them and alerts Kojo that Ku is after the student's ship, so she takes him to a dumb airship owned by Folia. Shortly after, Yukina's master from the organization drops her lance before Kojo and the others take off. Back on the ship, Kinase infuriates Ku by bluntly telling him that his desire to become human by sacrificing her to wise blood will not work, because he's never been human. He leaps high and is about to dissect her, but Yukina steps in quickly and stops him with a kitchen knife. However, he forms more hitmen from his metal and charges towards them, but Kojo blasts in with a missile at the nick of time, though he's thanked by Yukina's tantrums instead. Nina demands for Wiseman's blood from Kale, but it's too late, and though his skull is physically present, his blood is all over the sea, seeking to gather enough metals to create his form. In no time, he's rebirthed into a gold metallic monster, who begins to attack Kojo. To prevent the entire ship from being destroyed, Kojo activates a mist, but in the process, he turns to metal and Yukina breaks down crying. However, his predecessor, Aurora, kisses him back to life to give him a second chance and a new familiar, and after taking some of Yukina's blood, he summoned all his familiars, while Yukina takes on the foolish kill with her lance and terminates him into nothing. While Kojo summons an entirely new familiar, a giant maiden, who suffocates this wise blood guy in her bosom and melts him into nothingness. Afterwards, Kojo gives into his fatigue and falls asleep. After a while, Yukina's teacher asks her what she'll love to do in the future, and while changing in the bathroom, she ponders upon it, but a scary plotless figure appears out of nowhere and punches her in the chest. Later, Yukina starts acting weird, talking to Kojo like she's just meeting him for the first time, and also petting Mina like she's a kid. Mina acts out by fondling Yukina's squishes in public, but she seems to be bothered by what she feels. She refers to Nagisa as an aunt and to Asaji as a doctor, but soon she feels sick and takes off. Meanwhile, Vatler and Sayaka hang out at some ruins, watching some unnatural waves stem out of a pit. Gradually, Vatel begins to glow a purple shade and summons one of his dragons, sends them to the bottom of the well and waits to see what happens. Surprisingly, the dragon comes out of the well looking like it just tapped some XP and upgraded. Back at school, Kojo figures from Yukina's random speech that she's not really the one, because she suddenly has vampire urges. Coincidentally, the real Yukina comes in and tells Kojo to step away from the fake so she'll get rid of her. Before the fake can explain herself, the dragon from the ruins flies over the school, and Mina tries to control the situation with her dimension pentagrams. Fake Yukina seems to recognize the creature, and the moment it spots her, it pierces through her with its appendages and leaves her dead. Kojo grabs it, but the dragon fastens its tail around his hand and uses its suckers to slowly drain the life out of Kojo. Yukina steps in and rescues Kojo, but when she uses her lance on the dragon, it shatters into pieces. It could be all over for her, but her body double summons a familiar and defeats the dragon, and then Kojo goes to console Yukina about her broken lance, after which she's summoned by her organization. While bathing at Kinesis, Yuki's double says that the dragon was created by humans and transcends time and space, destroying the land beneath it. As a confirmation, Asaji's informed by her that the island is gradually falling apart, though it isn't so obvious. Later in the day, Yukina informs Sayaka and Kojo that she's been summoned by the organization and probably won't be allowed to stay by Kojo's side because she's effed up way too many times. She leaves tearfully, and Kojo tells Sayaka that this is probably for the best because he's been nothing but trouble to her. But Sayaka slaps the stupidity out of him and calls him a pathetic wimp. She tells him to man up and fight for Yukina because she'd have done the same for him. Realizing that she's right, Kojo thanks Sayaka and runs to stop Yukina while recalling the memories they shared together. However, on his way, the dragon causes massive destruction and Asaji tells Kojo to run to safety because the island will sink in the next few hours. Asaji's about to confess that she kissed him because she's in love with him, but the intercoms cease at that moment. Meanwhile, Yukina is approached by her fake version and advised to confront her feelings. She confesses that she really wants to stay with Kojo, so the fake creates a magical ticket that'll take her to meet Kojo. Kojo, on the other hand, attacks the dragon with his familiar and actually kills it, but it immediately resurrects. With Sayaka and Arteta's help, they attack the dragon again, but again it falls and resurrects in seconds. After the dragon absorbs some of Kojo's powers, Kojo falls to the ground, and Valter steps in quickly, prepared to go all out on the dragon. From the skies, Yukina suddenly appears with a new lance and strikes the dragon at its core, making it squirt so much cream. Kojo takes some of her blood and becomes strong enough to revert the dragon's attacks. Then, both Yukinas combine the energies of their weapons and sever its tail, and Kojo's familiar finishes the job, destroying the dragon's stronghold. After this battle, everything returns to normal and Yukina says she'll plead for her organization to let her stay back on the island. But Sayaka tells her that no one really asked her to leave the island, and the return order was just for a routine medical checkup. Fake Yukina bids them goodbye and leaves, but before she does, she calls Yukina her mom, then disappears. After reasoning everything out, Yukina and Kojo realize that she was their daughter from the future, given that she was a vampire and a spitting image of Yukina. As Kojo finds himself doing menial labor at the pool, he starts to complain like a 21st century girl about why he should clean the pool when he is supposed to enjoy his life. Yukina, who had been observing him, reminds Kojo that he usually leaves his classes early and bunks them, which is why he is made to do the extra work. Upon hearing this, Kojo kindly jogs Yukina's memory up by telling her how he doesn't skip classes for shits and giggles, but is always getting into some messed up trouble with the monsters released by Frankenstein. With that, he complains about how Mina is racist when it comes to vampires, as she is always making him work to the bones. Yukina, being in her ovulation period, smiles at Kojo and tells him that she will help him clean the pool. Feeling guilty, Kojo apologizes to Yukina, who assures him that she is the fourth progenitor's observer after all. While jumping in the pool, Yukina accidentally flashes Kojo her plot armor, which instantly causes her to blush. She gets upset at Kojo, telling him how he is perverted even when Kojo reminds her that he is literally not at fault for her own stupidity. Feeling flustered, Yukina grabs a water pipe and uses it to teach Kojo a lesson. All of a sudden, Yeza arrives on scene and tells the duo how they cannot flirt openly like this. Hearing this, Kojo wonders if he is surrounded by blind people who cannot see what is actually going on. Yukina joins the conversation by angrily telling Yuste that she would rather sign up for medieval torture than flirt with Kojo. Changing subjects, Yuste tells the gang how this fancy resort is hosting a trial run, allowing broke losers to attend the place for free, which is why they should also go since they are also bums. As Kojo and Yukina express excitement, Yeze states that he will also extend the invitation to Nagisa and Asaji. The following day, Kojo and Asaji are seen slaving away at a food stall. After serving some of the customers, Kojo angrily states how Yeze fooled them again. Asaji, on the other hand, smiles and tells Kojo that she is used to Yeze's deviousness. She follows up by saying how the guy always has an ulterior motive behind his too-good-to-be-true suggestions. Kojo huffs in annoyance and tells Asaji how the trial run is so hyper-realistic, as the customers around him look and feel like real people. After taking a sip from Asaji's water bottle, Kojo lets go of his anger and tells Asaji how he is still glad that his friends are enjoying the stay at the resort in exchange for their hard labor. Meanwhile, Yukina and Nagisa browse around at the aquarium when Nagisa asks Yukina if she is curious about what Asaji and Kojo might be doing. Yukina blankly tells her that the two of them must be selling hot dogs. Nagisa sighs at Yukina's naivety and tells her how Asaji is probably trying out Kojo's hot dog as they speak. Before Yukina can react, a magic pulse hits her and Nagisa out of nowhere. At first, Yukina wonders if this was caused by Kojo, but she quickly changes her mind as she remembers how Kojo's magic feels entirely different. Looking around, Yukina realizes that nobody except her and Nagisa felt the impact. Suddenly, Nagisa tells Yukina to look at the demonic beasts. Following the signal, Yukina sees the demonic beasts going cray-cray inside their water tanks. She instantly realizes how this must be because of the magic pulse. All of a sudden, Nagisa levitates like a cursed child from a horror movie and commands the demonic beasts to simmer down. The beasts adhere to the command, surprising Yukina. However, all of a sudden, Nagisa loses consciousness, causing Yukina to tend to her. A voice addresses Yukina, and she looks up to see a girl with long black hair holding a camera. The girl then asks Yukina if she can take a picture of her. Bamboozled by the girl's demand, Yukina politely tells her that she cannot model at this moment. Hearing this, the girl tells Yukina that she has a potential of being an entrepreneur, and then takes her leave. In the meantime, Kojo goes to deliver food when he sees a young girl sitting on the porch. After observing her, Kojo finds himself thinking how an ankle monitor can just be a really unique jewelry. However, he quickly shrugs off his nasty thoughts and goes to meet with Asaji, who asks him why he is hanging out with a young girl. When Kojo turns to see what Asaji is talking about, he finds the same young chick he saw earlier. The girl then introduces herself as Yume and reveals how Sayaka saved her from a research facility. However, while escaping, Sayaka asked her to seek a man named Kojo while she eliminates the bad guys in the building. After learning about Yume's ordeal, Asaji tells Kojo that they should meet up with Yukina and get more information on Sayaka's mission since they are friends. Without further ado, Kojo and Asaji head inside the resort where they first have a cookout. Afterwards, Yukina informs Kojo that she tried to get more information, but all she knows is that Sayaka is still alive. Just as Yukina and Kojo are trying to figure out more, Yume joins the conversation and reveals that perhaps Sayaka is trying to save her older sister, who was also locked up with her in Kusuki Arai's lab. Hearing the name, Kojo tries to remember where he heard this name before. Yukina then chimes in, stating that Kusuki is the resort's owner. This prompts them to ask Yume why a resort owner would lock her and her sister in a lab. As Yume looks at Kojo with apprehensiveness, Kojo assures her that they are just trying to help her and her sister, Riru. Upon hearing this, Yume reveals how Arise was initially after Riru, who was willingly participating in experiments conducted by Kusuki. When Kojo tries to inquire about the experiments, Yume becomes quiet and tells Kojo that she does not want to talk about that right now. In the meantime, Sayaka is apprehended by the black-haired girl Yukina encountered in the aquarium, and it turns out she is also working for Kusuki. Now locked up in Kusuki's lab, Sayaka confronts the girl by asking her if she is a sword shaman too. In response, the girl reveals she is a Rikujin priestess, which makes Sayaka realize that the stranger is just like her, only better and stronger. Now feeling threatened, Sayaka tells the girl she and her are two peas in a pod, as they are both dogs of the state who mindlessly follow orders. The only difference is that they both work for different organizations. After hearing Sayaka yap, the girl introduces herself as Kisaki and states that she is not her enemy. However, Sayaka finds that hard to believe and tells Kisaki that if that was true, she would not have restrained her like she is about to steal her organs. To prove she is legit, Kisaki unlocks Sayaka's handcuffs and tells her that she will release her once her mission is completed, but before that she must become a vessel for power. Before Sayaka's pathetic brain can process what is happening, Kisaki unravels a weapon which sends Sayaka to her knees. Kisaki then states that the only reason her organization, Teishikyoko, exists is because they wish to protect humanity. In the meantime, Kojo wakes up and finds Yukina and Nagisa and Asaji all sleeping together. Before he can let his animal out on the unconscious girls, Yaze walks in the room, looking like he filled his liver with a ton of keg. As Kojo tries to check up on him, Yaze runs towards him, but ends up colliding with a wall. Before fainting, Yaze mutters something about mind control. All of a sudden, Kojo hears a girl weeping. Usually he ignores such instances since he knows how his kind usually die in horror movies. However, this time Kojo mans up and finds Yume crying, who tells him to stay back. Suddenly, Kojo is greeted by Yume's tail, which causes Yume to run away in embarrassment. As Kojo turns around, he finds Yukina standing. He quickly tells her how something is terribly wrong with Yume, but Yukina just tells him how all girls grow tails while they're growing up. However, Kojo finds that hard to believe and tries to go after Yume when he is stopped by Yukina, who screams at him over how he is behaving like someone who has shit ton of baby oil in his bathroom. Kojo is surprised by Yukina's behavior, who continues to berate him for not being attentive towards her, and how he is always flirting with Yume and the other girls. The more Yukina talks, the more unhinged she becomes. Luckily, she stops talking altogether, but goes to grab her weapon so she can dispose of Kojo. However, as she aims her weapon towards him, Asaji enters the room and asks Kojo why he is always flirting with Yukina when he cannot even grab her badonkas. Without any warning, Asaji jumps at Kojo, hoping to tell him how her kitty grips like pop sockets. All of a sudden, Yukina zaps Asaji with her weapon, causing her to fall unconscious. Slightly embarrassed by her behavior, Yukina states how Asaji was being mind controlled before she freed her. Upon hearing this, Kojo states that he never once believed two hot chicks would be fighting for his cooter shooter. All of a sudden, Nagisa hugs Kojo from behind, making him sigh. He asks Yukina to please take care of her, which she quickly does. Once things return to normalcy, Kojo and Yukina wonder who could possibly want them all to gangbang like this when Yume is heard snickering from above. Throwing off her innocence, which had everyone fooled, Yume states how she mind-controlled everyone so they'd say the things they really want to say. She also reveals how she was unable to control Kojo's brain and asks him if it's because he doesn't have a brain altogether, as she was assured by Kisaki that she'd be able to even manipulate the Leviathan. Seeing such a drastic shift in Yume's attitude, Kojo confidently states that she cannot be the sweet girl he carried on his back. Yume smiles and says she is Yume, only Yume likes to call her Riru. Remembering how Yume told them she had an older sister, Riru, Yukina asks the girl in front of her whether Yume has dissociated personality disorder. Yume or Riru tells Yukina that she is closer to the truth, as Yume did create her as a trauma response since she was bullied by her peers and parents. Confused as to why anyone would bully a girl like Yume, Yukina asks Riru what made people hate Yume. The girl then reveals that it's because Yume is a succubus, and nobody wants to befriend or parent a girl who can manipulate their minds to make them confess their most sinful desires. After learning the truth, Riru confidently tells Kojo that he must hate Yume now, but to her dismay, Kojo states that his last girlfriend had 20 personalities. Surprised by this, Riru asks Kojo if he is a PDF file, but instead of waiting for a response, she makes her escape. Kisaki arrives on scene and greets Kojo and Yukina, who informs Kojo how Kisaki belongs to an organization that also deals with magic disasters. Kisaki then sends a mind-controlled Sayaka at Kojo and Yukina while she takes off with Riru. Kojo tells Yukina to go after Riru while he deals with Sayaka. Before leaving, Yukina tells Kojo how Sayaka is super strong and therefore he should be cautious. Quickly after that, a fight ensues between Sayaka and Kojo, who throws Sayaka into a nearby river and then sucks her blood. Elsewhere, Yume returns to herself and tells Kisaki and Yukina to stop fighting over her. Without giving them a chance to react, Yume flies off like a bat. Yukina returns and finds Sayaka back to her senses, so she asks if President Kusuke wants a young girl, because he intends to open an Epstein Island. Sayaka then clarifies that Yume is a descendant of the world's strongest succubus, Lil Lai. This is why Kusuke intends to use Yume's power to control a living weapon called Leviathan. Upon learning the truth, the gang decides to seek Asaji's help to uncover more details. The computer geek reveals how Kusuke has actually made an AI named Riru to bring out Yume's succubus power. Turns out Yume doesn't have an alter ego, but is forcefully given a computerized alter ego which can be manipulated. Without wasting another moment, Kojo, Sayaka, and Yukina rush to save Yume. Inside the vehicle, Sayaka angrily tells Kojo to forget what he saw earlier. Turns out, while Kojo and Sayaka had a duel, Sayaka's bikini came undone. Kojo quickly assures Sayaka what he saw was pretty forgettable, so she should not worry at all. This makes Sayaka even more upset. causing her to rage out at Kojo. Yukina, who had been quietly sitting behind, tells the two to stop flirting when they are literally about to confront a biblical beast. However, when the two try to argue, Yukina shows she is 10% thug by pulling out her weapon, which instantly shuts them up. In the meantime, Kusaki dives under the water in search of Leviathan, with an unconscious Yume in the glass tank. Back at the resort, Asaji tries to cancel the program made by Kusaki, which causes a split in Yume's personality. She seeks Mogwai's help, who reveals to her how Yume's second personality is designed to have hatred for humanity. While trying to delete the program, Asaji is confronted by her co-worker, Lydiane, who reveals how she is to look after the program for the orders of Taisha Kyoko. This surprises Asaji, who tries to ask her why she is helping such a shitty organization. In response, Lydiane tells Asaji that it is none of her business and challenges her to try and stop her. Meanwhile, under the water, Kusaki's submarine stops as it spots Leviathan chilling around. However, all of a sudden, Riru awakens, which surprises Kusaki, who quickly rings Kusaki to ask her what is happening. Kusaki then reveals that she used him and was not really following his orders, as she is given a secret task by her organization, which is to sink the island. As Kusaki grows mad with anger, Riru asks him if he is surprised to learn that he is the real victim. Now boiling with rage, Kusaki tries to attack Riru, who easily takes the old man out. Outside, Kusaki learns about the intrusion of Kojo's gang and goes to confront them. Being the badass girl boss that she is, Kusaki states that once Leviathan is manipulated by Riru, then they will not be able to do anything. Upon hearing from Kusaki how it's Riru that is manipulating Leviathan, Kojo states that he thought Kusaki was the one doing all the manipulation. Kusaki then reveals how it was Yume's true wish to destroy the island, as she was ostracized by everyone on the island. Kusaki follows up by revealing how Yume put her parents and classmates into a coma since she wanted to protect herself from their brutality. She also discloses how there were moments when Yume contemplated offing herself, but could not because she knew Lila would choose another vessel and the cycle of hate and pain will just continue. This is why Yume partnered up with her, so that they can both achieve their goals. Yume will control Leviathan, using her mind-controlling abilities causing destruction to the island, which is what Kusaki and her organization are after, while Yume will die inside of Leviathan, whose belly would stop Lila's spirit from escaping. Upon hearing how Yume intends to die alone, Kojo becomes mad with fury. Kusaki then states how Yume did create Riru as a self-defense mechanism, which is why Yume agreed to come with Sayaka, but Riru remembered all the dark emotions lurking inside of Yume, which is why she collaborated with her. Kojo becomes more upset and tells Kusaki how he will save Yume. Kusaki, however, confidently tells Kojo that he stands no chance against the Leviathan, which is the strongest living weapon. In response, Kojo smirks and tells Kusaki that she is forgetting that he is the protagonist of this show. No matter the threat, he will easily defeat it. Acknowledging Kojo's confidence, Kusaki takes out her weapon to stop Kojo when Sayaka steps in and tells Kojo and Yukina to proceed ahead while she confronts Kusaki. Agreeing with Sayaka, Kojo and Yukina then come across Leviathan, who is as huge as Nicki Minaj's behind almost instantly. Kojo and Yukina are attacked by the beast. Yukina does her best to dodge the attack, but since she is a female, she is unable to slay the demon. Both Kojo and Yukina quickly realize that attacking such a majestic beast from outside is impossible, so Kojo suggests they go inside Leviathan and bring Yume back to the surface, since she is the cause of all of this. Yukina smiles and tells Kojo that if they survive, they can have a celebratory bang-bang. In the meantime, Lydiana taunts Asaji over how she is bad with both men and machines, so not even a robot would fall for her. This pisses off Asaji so much that she goes full stalking mode. And not only does she stop Lydiana, but also uncovers Lydiana's true identity. This impresses Lydiana greatly, and she finds herself getting inspired by Asaji. In the meantime, Kusaki drops a bomb on Sayaka. No, it's not her ass, but the truth about how Asaji will destroy humankind in the future if she is left alive. However, Sayaka fails to understand why Kusaki's organization would destroy the island until Kusaki informs her how Asaji cannot be destroyed as long as she is on the island. She states that Etagami Island is the altar of Cain and is designed to protect the priestess of Cain, which happens to be none other than Asaji. This is why Taishikyoku is using Leviathan to sink the entire island. Despite learning about Kusaki's motives, Sayaka decides to fight her and finishes her off within seconds. Inside Leviathan's belly, Kojo and Yukina convince Yume to just get a therapist instead of offing herself. After a lot of convincing, Yume agrees, but then Leviathan breaks free of Yume's control and gets upset over how humans tried to manipulate and control him. So he has his own version of Me Too movement, which involves firing laser beams. Kojo sucks Yukina's blood and calls upon a new familiar, an intelligent sword, to deal with Leviathan. However, when that does not work, Yume sings a melody which instantly calms Leviathan, as he wants to get far away from Yume's shitty voice. With the threat dealt with, Yume returns with Kojo and Yukina. The next day, Yume tells Kojo and his freaks how she is officially allowed to stay on Atogami Island. This makes Kojo really happy, as he now gets to have a girl that he can supply to Leonardo DiCaprio. Yume notices his enthusiasm and tells Kojo that she will do her best as a woman to keep him happy. This surprises Kojo, who asks Yume what exactly does she mean, and so Yume reminds him how in Leviathan's belly he promised to make her happy. Realizing that Yume mistook what he meant, Kojo tries to clarify himself, which has him incur Yume's accusations about how all men are trash. Meanwhile, Yukina observes Kojo from the bushes and wonders if Kojo is just a lover boy or a certified PDF file. Suddenly, Negisa and Kanase appear from behind and remind Yukina that just because she was appointed as Kojo's observer does not mean she has to go creepy mode on him. Yukina tries to make up excuses, but of course, Negisa has none of that. Kanase, on the other hand, tells Yukina that she feels what she feels, as they are in the same boat. Once the NPCs take their leave, Yukina is greeted by a man who asks her if he can sit on the bench next to her. Upon seeing him, Yukina comes to realize why young girls go for older daddies. The man then asks her why she is intensely staring at Kojo and wonders aloud whether she is a stalker or a jealous girl. Yukina gets flustered and, instead of answering him, demands to know his identity. All of a sudden, Negisa returns and addresses the older man as Gaju. Shortly after that, Gojo arrives on the scene and enthusiastically greets Gaju, who turns out to be Kojo and Negisa's father. A few days later, Kojo finds himself in the class and asks his teacher, Mina, why he is studying on New Year's Eve. Mina then crudely reminds him that he is a parasite growing on human feces and deserves to be institutionalized. Astart, who is also present in the room, agrees with Mina. Changing subjects, Mina asks Kojo where his hot daddy is, and so Kojo reveals that he came to visit his sister a week ago and then took her back to the mainland with him. Once Kojo is done informing Mina, he asks her how she knows his father. Mina then reveals how his father is constantly meddling with her job, which surprises Kojo, as he wonders how his lousy father can interfere with an attack mage's job. After class, Kojo returns home and thanks Yukina for cleaning up his crib. Yukina, who is hellbent on becoming a wife, smiles sheepishly and tells Jojo that she can help him train his pack too. However, Kojo dismisses her and angrily wonders why his mother made him deep clean the house. Wanting to cool down, Kojo then tells Yukina how Mina was inquiring about his father. Before they can continue the conversation, the door begins to ring. Upon checking the door, Kojo is greeted by his dumb friend Yeze, who reminds him how they all planned on going to the temple together, and is then met with a sight that you losers can only dream of. All the girls shyly greet Kojo in their traditional yukatas and ask him to compliment them all. Sighing, Kojo tells them that he is not in his ovulation and asks them to cool their ovaries by giving them some cold water. Asagithan notices how Yukina has made herself home, which slightly pisses her off. Yeze also tells them how Yukina and Kojo look like a married couple, which ends up earning him a punch from Asaji. Suddenly, Kojo receives a text from Megisa. However, his smile completely vanishes when he sees the text, which happens to be a picture of a magic circle. Kojo and the gang arrive at the firework festival. However, throughout the whole event, Kojo remains worried sick for Negisa. In the end, he caves and tells Yukina about how the magic circle looks familiar to the one Sayaka makes. Yukina agrees and also reveals how these magic circles are hard to make, and she has only seen Sayaka make them. Growing apprehensive by the minute, Kojo tries to contact Sayaka, who ends up being unreachable. In his state of worry, Kojo grabs Yukina's shoulders and demands to know if there is a way to contact Sayaka. Asaji seizes this opportunity to make her own brownie points by telling Kojo to chill the heck out, and then invites him to his place. After arriving there, Asaji seeks Mogwe's help to track Gaju and Negisa's movement, while Kojo and Yukina are unaware of what is happening. Both Mogwe and Asaji realize how Gaju never once ran in traffic, which is rather odd. Yukina then uses her own mind and wonders if a large-scale organization unleashed a barrier to keep citizens out. Mogwe then says what Yukina had been speculating by announcing that the Special Defense Forces are behind this, which happened to be a government agency that specializes in magical disasters. Upon hearing that, Yukina grows pale with worry and runs off, leaving Asaji and Kojo curious. As Kojo runs after Yukina, the girl reveals how the SDF is a dummy organization run by her agency, aka the Lion King organization. With that said, Yukina becomes rowdy and tries to take action when Kojo steps in to calm her down. Yukina asks him why he is so calm when her sister might have been caught in some incident caused by her organization. Kojo quickly assures her that just because she works for the agency does not mean she is responsible for their dirty work. He also assures her that Sayaka, who is a loyal member of the Lion King organization, would never betray her. All of a sudden, Kisaki arrives on the street and tells Kojo and Yukina that she knows what Lion King is up to and can tell them. However, before spilling the beans, she warns them by stating they will regret knowing. The next day, Asaji decides to go to the mainland to learn about Nagisa when the island guards rush to apprehend her. Elsewhere, Kojo and Yukina arrive to meet Nagisa. Kojo tells her that he needs a way to the mainland, but Mina reminds him that he has to get a visa. But if he does that, then his identity will be unveiled. Kojo asks Mina for help, who tells him that she will not let him do something illegal. Upon hearing this, Kojo tells Mina that he will ask someone else for help, which causes Mina to restrain him. Before being apprehended by Mina, Kojo gets told by Kisaki how the Lion King's organization is really after an old relic from the Holy Massacre. Continuing on, Kisaki also reveals that the relic was thrown in the place called Kanawa, and to hide the relic, a whole village was decimated and a dam was built in its place. Now it is believed that the relic is coming undone. In the present, Mina learns that Kisaki has already told Kojo confidential information. Kojo becomes frustrated by Mina's behavior and tells her that he cannot let Nagisa come in contact with the relic. Mina counters Kojo by telling him that she knows Nagisa has already forcefully unsealed a holy relic. When Kojo expresses shock at the news, Mina states that he has still not uncovered his lost memories. She then bluntly tells him that she simply cannot let him leave the island. As Kojo struggles to unbind himself, Nina arrives and helps Kojo by stating that Kanase was worried about them. All of a sudden, Kanase arrives and leads Kojo and Yukina out of Mina's grasp. While fleeing the scene, Kisaki arrives with a van and tells them to hop in for free ice cream and molestation. Inside, Kisaki speculates that Mina and the Lion King are probably working together, since Mina seems to know what was happening in Lake Kanawa. This makes both Kojo and Yukina rather upset. Kojo then tells Kisaki that he will seek Vatler's help to get to the mainland. Of course, Kisaki, being shady as always, tells Kojo that his plan is extremely risky and can be avoided since her organization has a private jet which can fly him out like rappers, flat OnlyFans models. In the meantime, Asaji tries to dodge the soldiers after her. She asks Mogwai why this is happening, and he reveals that there are people that do not want her leaving the island. While running, Asaji reaches a dead end and expresses worry when all of a sudden, Lydiana arrives to help her. She tells Asaji that Mogwai called her for help and she was more than willing to give her a helping hand. Back inside the Diddler van, Kojo gets upset seeing the fake identity papers made by Kisaki. It turns out she has given Kojo and Yukina papers which make them look like they are married. After calming down, Kojo asks Kisaki why she is helping them out so much when a few episodes ago she wanted to sacrifice them for a corn chip. Kisaki bluntly tells him that she is simply doing this to piss off Lion King since her organization is on bad terms with Yukina's organization. And now, since Lion King does not want him to go to the mainland, she will help him out. All of a sudden, Yukina notices an invisible magic circle and tries to stop the van. However, when she fails, Kisaki and the rest jump out in time. The van then vanishes into a void and out comes Mina, who declares she is not letting Kojo go. Infuriated by Mina's constant meddling, Kojo tells her to just piss off, but Mina remains rigid. She states that if the object beneath Lake Kanawa really is a relic, then him coming in contact with it can cause disasters she is not willing to deal with. She also tells Kojo that he is a walking time bomb since he cannot even recall anything about Aurora. When Kojo asks what she means, Mina reveals that Aurora was the fourth progenitor which sleeps inside of Nagisa after he eliminated her. As Kojo's head begins to pulsate with pain, Mina continues and tells Kojo and the gang that the Lion King organization is not interested in Nagisa, but rather wants Aurora's power. Kojo calms down as he realizes that his teacher is keeping Nagisa safe, and also tells Yukina that her organization did not betray her after all. However, Kojo, stubborn as he is, tells Mina that he is still going to the mainland for his sister. Yukina, sharing the same sentiment, joins Kojo as they face Mina together. As the fight gains intensity, Kanase steps in by teleporting Kojo to safety. In the meantime, Asaji finds herself in a pickle when her signals are blocked, and she is unable to contact Mogwai. The guards gain up on her when suddenly a nerd boy arrives on scene and takes out everyone except Asaji. He turns toward Asaji, addressing her as the priestess of Cain, and tells her to go ahead. In the meantime, Kisaki and Yukina confront Mina while Kojo finds himself in Mina's dream, where she tells him how hard she has tried to keep his true identity a secret. Kojo ignores her and asks her why she is supporting the Lion King organization. Mina finally reveals that the organization is not trying to dig up the relic, but rather wish to seal it, as it is known to be a weapon of mass destruction. Kojo tells Mina to stop following bullshit propaganda, pointing at how Nagisa is carrying Aurora inside of her, which is why it does not make sense for her to keep Nagisa in Kanoa. Mina solemnly tells Kojo that Aurora has the spell which can permanently seal the weapon. She also states that they would have used him, but he does not remember his old memories, so he is useless. After a boring conversation, Kanase tells Kojo to just suck her blood and fight Mina so they can all move on. Kojo obliges and gathers his power to summon a familiar when Mina tells him that he cannot call a familiar in this dream realm. Kojo smugly tells her that he is summoning a familiar to help Yukina, who is fighting a version of her. As the fight goes on, Mina caves and tells Kojo that he may pass. This surprises Kojo, who asks Mina why she is letting them go. Mina states that she cannot have him wrecking the island anymore, and then hands him some test questions to do in his spare time. Prior to everything going to shit, Nagisa arrives in Kanoa with Gaoju, who excuses himself to take a leak when he is suddenly attacked by a girl. Gaoju notices how this girl is using high-end weapons, which surprises him. The girl then unleashes a magic circle, which Nagisa sees from the car, and is instantly mesmerized with it. She takes a snap to send it to Kojo, but realizes she has no signals. In the meantime, Gaoju fights for his life, but then cuts through the girl's restraints and even punishes her by taking off her plot armor. Suddenly, another girl arrives to help her friend, but before she can do anything, Gaoju holds the girl at gunpoint. Suddenly, a group of soldiers arrive on the site, and a woman confronts Gaoju that if he does not throw arms, then they will make his daughter watch X-rated movies featuring tentacles. Gaoju sees an unconscious Nagisa and instantly surrenders. Now locked up, Gaoju becomes the curse for his captors by demanding constant food from them. Yuri, the girl whose plot armor was taken off by Gaoju, tends to the old man who tries to flirt with her when her friend Shio zaps him with holy water. As Gaoju tastes the food, he instantly realizes that he is in the custody of STF, who are collaborating with the Lion King organization, which means they are after the holy relic. This stuns both Shio and Yuri, who curiously ask Gaoju how he managed to figure such confidential information. Gaoju then reveals that the dog food he is eating is a specialty of STF, and the rest was pure speculation. All of a sudden, a woman appears and tells Gaoju that he is as cunning as ever. Seeing the woman named Izano, Gaoju instantly starts verbally abusing her by telling her how she has hit the wall. Izano ignores him and asks Gaoju if he remembers anything about his kids Nagisa and Kojo. As he tries to remember, Gaoju's head begins to pulsate with pain. Izano observes this and tells Gaoju that she knew his memories had been altered ever since the fourth progenitor was resurrected. Gaoju then curses the old woman, who calmly tells Shio to look after Gaoju. Before leaving with Yuri, Izano tells Gaoju that they will finish Aurora off completely this time. Meanwhile, Nagisa enjoys herself in a hot spring. She wonders how, even though she was told by Grandma Izano to take a chill pill in a hot spring, she simply cannot do so since she is missing her friends. All of a sudden, a girl named Kuraki enters the hot spring and asks Nagisa if she can join her. Nagisa gives her the permission and instantly grows a liking to Kuraki and her watermelons. The more they continue to play, the more Nagisa feels at ease with her. Suddenly, Kuraki drops her act and tells Nagisa that she is a lot like her, and then calls out Aurora. Elsewhere, a group of soldiers are seen keeping tabs on the relic under the man-made lake of Kanoa. Izano tells the gang that she knows a way to suppress the artifact, which is probably why the Lion King organization has asked her to join in. Kuraki enters the scene and tells Izano that she is right on the dot. Yuri sees Kuraki and instantly realizes she is in the presence of one of the three saints. Izano turns toward Yuri and asks her what she thinks of the relic Avalon. While everyone sees it as a weapon of mass destruction, Yuri tells everyone that she feels Avalon is just misunderstood. Izano gives her a stink eye and tells Kuraki to take Yuri with her. Kuraki agrees and asks a general named Izama if the preparations have been arranged. Once Izama gives her the go, Kuraki announces that they are ready to have a ceremony which will eliminate Aurora once and for all. Nagisa wakes up and finds herself inside Lake Kanoa. She is then greeted by Kuraki, who quickly tells her that she brought her consciousness inside the lake, while her body is on the surface. However, Nagisa tells Kuraki that the body she is talking about is not hers. Karaki tells her that she is correct, and the body belongs to the fourth progenitor, who they are going to use as a sacrifice for the greater good. Hearing this, Nagisa states, "Screw utilitarianism." However, Karaki assures her that Aurora has always been dead, so using her to subdue Avalon is not that big of a deal. Nagisa tries to stop Karaki violently, revealing that she has gotten everything wrong, but it is too late. The seal is broken, and thousands of monsters are spotted inside the river. Meanwhile, in the hold-up cell, Gaju asks Shio if she senses something amiss. All of a sudden, the place is surrounded by monsters, who are there to clap their cheeks. Gaju instantly breaks through the wall, which shocks Shio, who asks Gaju how he managed to do that. In response, Gaju states to clap or not be clapped is the question. And he is not in the mood of getting owned by overgrown bugs, so he used a cool trick to help himself. Hearing this, Shio realizes how Gaju is the same man who became famous for coming back from the dead. While Gaju and Shio take care of the monsters, Karaki tells Hisano that she was wrong about Avalon as it manipulated them. After defeating a bunch of monsters, Gaju and Shio discover Aurora, who apologizes and then lets Nagisa have control over her body. Gaju picks up an unconscious Nagisa when he and Shio are greeted by a huge dragon. Elsewhere, Yuri awakens and meets a naked girl. In the meantime, Asaji and Lydian arrive closer to their destination, Lake Kanawha, when they are welcomed by a horde of monsters. Before Lydian can blast them off, Asaji tells her that there is a boy in front of them. Lydian warns the boy to shoo away, but when he does not listen, Lydian fires the monsters. To her dismay, she is greeted by more mobsters. The boy cockily tells them that even though they look pitiful, he is glad they were worried for him. With that, he magically destroys all the monsters on sight. Upon observing the stranger's power, Lydian asks him if he is from the Dynasty of Destruction. The boy feigns surprise over how there are peasants that know of him, and then introduces himself as the direct descendant of the second progenitor, ruler of the Dynasty of Destruction, Iblis. Elsewhere, Yuri reunites with Hisano, who asks her about the strange girl saddled on her back. Yuri tells her that it looks like the storks dropped her a kid to look after. Not in the mode of giggling, Hisano clenches her butt and tells Yuri to look after the wounded and to not let the child vanish from her eyes. Meanwhile, in the hot spring, Kojo learns from Mogwai that Asaji is also in Kanawha. Suddenly, Kisaki enters the men's area and makes an attempt to flirt with Kojo. After joking around, Kisaki tells Kojo that she is here to say goodbye as her organization needs her at Lake Kanawha after a monster attack was reported. Kojo grows worried after hearing this, which prompts Kisaki to tell him that if they were to survive another mission, then they should get together and bang it off. All of a sudden, Yukina arrives on the scene and finds Kisaki and Kojo together. Since Yukina is a girl's girl, she takes her anger out on Kojo instead of the other woman. Back at Asaji's gang, Lydian tells the camel humper that he was amazing back there. Asaji joins in and commends Iblis for effortlessly taking care of the magical beasts. Iblis shrugs and asks the girls how to eat canned foods. Once the girls help him out, Iblis tells them that they are not like other girls who are only nice to him for his camels and oil reserves. Asaji shrugs it off by telling Iblis that they are from an island where they are literally surrounded by freaks, so seeing royalty is no biggie for them. Hearing this, Iblis smiles and grows a liking to Asaji. Back at Lake Kanawha, Gaju and Shio come across multiple dead bodies of magical beasts. Hisano arrives on the scene shortly. Before they can have a conversation, Gaju senses something amiss and hands Nagisa to Shio and asks her to run as fast her fat legs can take her. Suddenly, a guy riding a wyvern arrives with the intention of causing havoc. When the guy proves too strong to be dealt with, Gaju orders Shio to run. However, the masked man throws a spear at Shio's direction. Gaju rushes to protect her and ends up getting hurt in the process. Fortunately, Vapler arrives and tells his servants, Tobias and Kira, to apprehend the masked man. While Vapler observes from afar, he is greeted by Iblis, Asaji, and Lydian. Iblis notices an unconscious Nagisa and instantly recognizes her as the fourth progenitor's sister. His attention is then transferred to Vapler, as they both seem to know the masked man as the fighter from the Holy Massacre faction. Without waiting for another moment, Iblis orders Asajito take the humans present on site, including Nagisa, to safety. Asaji quietly follows the order while Iblis summons his familiar and tries taking down the enemy. However, when the man makes a temporary retreat, Iblis tells Vatler that he calls dibs on that guy. Vatler then states that he has no problem since fanatics who scheme for Cain the sinful god to return should be executed, as this is the order he was given by their king. With that, Vatler takes his leave while Iblis is left thinking how Blondie is a smartass. In a card, Yuiri asks the girl what she is called. The girl reveals her name as Grenda, but then suddenly the vehicle is attacked by a woman who is dressed in the same fashion as the man Iblis fought. Grenada appears to recognize her and tries to hide, but when she sees Yuiri being overpowered by the bad lady, she transforms into an ugly monster. The lady cackles at this and states that this is what she was waiting for, and orders her golem to capture Grenda. With Yuiri feeling drained out, she prays for someone to rescue Grenda. Looks like Yuiri fed the homeless as Yukina and Kojo arrive on the scene. The lady recognizes Kojo as the fourth progenitor and instantly flees. Yuiri sees her colleague and rushes to warmly greet Yukina. Later on, Iblis demands to know why the Holy Massacre faction arrived on the lake. Ship apologizes and tells Iblis that she cannot reveal such confidential information. Enraged by her loyalty to her organization, Iblis reprimands her until an injured Gaju joins the conversation, revealing how the Lion King organization was after the Avalon, but before they knew what was going on, the lake froze and magical beasts went batshit crazy. After understanding the situation slightly, Iblis states that the Lion King organization has all their information wrong as he believes what was beneath the lake Kanawat is probably a divine instrument, powerful enough to be the sinful god's successor. Suddenly, Shio realizes something. The people she thought were on her side are not really as they seem. So when General Azama of the Special Magical Attack Regiment arrives to take Nadisa and the injured people, Shio raises her weapon to take him down. Similarly, another soldier named Yuianeji greets Yuiri under the pretense of escorting Grenda to safety. However, Grenda latches herself on Yuiri, which ticks off the soldier. Kojo quickly inserts himself in between and asks Yuianeji how he was aware of Grenda's name, which they only recently learned. Elsewhere, Shio tells Azama how she noticed that the Special Magical Attack Regiment were absolutely ass in the battle that happened a few minutes ago, and wonders if that is because the soldiers were given crappy weapons by the authorities. Azama tries to tell Shio that they didn't anticipate such a disaster, but Shio calls it bull and accuses him of being a knight of the sinful god. Without wasting momentum, Yuianeji orders his soldiers to attack, while Azama tells his men to attack Shio. However, before he can proceed, Karaki enters the chat and manipulates Azama's subordinates by strands of their chi. She asks Azama if he really thought he could use the Lion King organization to achieve his agenda. Suddenly, a girl riding a wyvern comes to attack Shio. When the hold is unveiled, Shio goes in shock, seeing the familiar face of Major Okiyama. Instead of dilly-dallying, Okiyama grabs Azama and flees the scene. Yuianeji is then reunited with Azama, who without blinking executes one of his own. He also fires multiple bullets at Yuiri, which ends up injuring her. Grenda sees this and transforms once again. This time, she grabs her friends and takes them to a hut in the mountains. A few hours later, Yuiri awakens and lets out a wild scream, seeing herself in nothing but her plot armor. Yukina arrives and asks Kojo if he is trying to harm Yuiri. Later on, Yukina makes food for all of them. That's when Kojo learns that Yukina, Yuiri, Sayaka, and Shio were all close as they worked in the same place. As they break their fast, Yuiri observes how Yukina and Kojo are like Pugyepi and Marza, which surprises Kojo and Yukina, who are blind to their obvious feelings for each other. Grenda, being a complete bumpkin, asks Yuiri bluntly if she likes Kojo. Yuiri gives her a sad smile and says that maybe in another life, she is in Yukina's place. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard from outside. Kojo goes to check and finds Azama there. He asks the man why he is alone, which prompts Azama to reveal that he is here to talk to him. He starts off by telling Kojo that this world is boring as the humans are constantly fearful of everything around them. He then reveals that the Holy Massacre was started by the Devas and the sinful god, Cain. Kojo tells Azama that he's really not interested in his bullshit, so Azama gets to the point, revealing that he and like-minded people like him want to resurrect the old god and then control him. He also reveals how Grenda is the guardian of the relic Cain left behind, and they want to use her to go up against the Artificial Island Management Corporation as they wish to destroy all the demons in Itogami Island and return the world to its proper state. This way, they can also save him from immortality, and he can die a human instead of a shiny vampire like Edward Cullen. The girls quickly arrive next to Kojo, pulling him back from his thoughts. Kojo tells Azama that his proposal was enticing, but he doesn't want to hand innocent Grenda to a man like him. As the battle commences, Azama sends Kojo into a void and Grenda follows after him. Inside the void, Brenda tells Kojo to suck her blood so he can absorb all the information inside of her. On the surface, Asagi, Iblis, and Lydiane reunite with Yukina to offer her support against Azama, when suddenly Kojo and Brenda break free of the void. This surprises Azama, as he wonders why Brenda would choose a demon. Instead of answering Azama, Kojo just defeats him in the battle and returns everything back to normal, except one thing. Asagi angrily asks Kojo why he kept his identity a secret. In response, Kojo smiles sheepishly since talking back to an angry woman is dangerous. Do you think Kojo looks better with Asagi? If so, comment Asagi for the win, and if you like anime recaps, then watch this video here.